Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Friday Night Opera. I'm Perrin Leach, the Managing Director of Houston Grand Opera. We're absolutely thrilled to have you here for HBO Digital's pre-show. Thank you for joining us. It's great to see you all, or not see you all. For those of you who've done these pre-shows before, welcome back. And for those of you who are new, welcome. This is the place where we'll introduce you to a little bit of what you're going to see tonight, and we'll give you some insight into the stories and the digital content you're about to see. The main event begins at 7:30 on Marquee TV or on our website, the marquee.tv or hgo.org/digital. So if you haven't worked that out yet, please make sure you give yourself plenty of time. All of our HBO digital presentations are generously underwritten by Sarah and Ernest Butler. We simply couldn't have done it without the Butler's support, and we're deeply, deeply grateful for them. And I'm sure that now you're enjoying all our digital projects. You share my gratitude to the amazing Butlers. Tonight's presentation of the Impresario is also sponsored by Shell Oil, and Bon Appétit is supported by Jen Ben Fink and Winstead PC. Again, we can't do this without considerable financial support, and we're deeply grateful for that. So tonight's release, what is it? It's a double bill of Bon Appétit by Lee Hoiby and Mark Schulgasser, and Mozart's The Impresario. You may have heard this guy Mozart, he's quite popular. And a new translation by Jim Lewis, who wrote Das Barbecue as well. It's hilariously funny, and I think you'll have a fantastic time. Tonight's release is a little bit like Vintage Sport, our last digital release, in that it's a opportunity for the Texas Opera Alliance, a newly formed Texas Opera Alliance, to contribute and work together on a partnership. It's directed by Lauren Mika, who's the General Director of San Antonio Opera and a great friend of the company and a friend of mine. I'm absolutely thrilled that Lauren is joining us now and is live on the San Antonio website as well. Hey, Lauren, how you doing?
I am doing excellent. Happy holiday weekend to you, Perrin.
Thank you so much. It's been an interesting holiday period for all of us, I think.
I know it has extraordinary, but I am grateful for the opportunity to see smiling faces this evening like yours. And I echo your sentiments about the collaboration that we've had between Houston Grand Opera and Opera San Antonio. It's been an amazing fall, and I'm really excited to see the premieres this evening.
Yeah, no, it's going to be fantastic, and they're short pieces, but they have a real punch to them, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the Impresario later, and afterwards as well. So I'm thrilled about that.
Absolutely.
In a little bit, we're going to have your guest lecturer, Annie Labatt, from Opera San Antonio, who's going to talk a little bit to us about the Impresario. But first of all, I think the man of the hour is Jeremy Johnson. Jeremy does a fantastic job of hosting all of these things. Jeremy, welcome. Good to see you.
Hey, how are you? Happy holidays, everyone. Nice to see you.
Happy holidays, Jeremy. Good to see you too.
Okay, Jeremy, Annie, we're going to hand it over to you, and we'll see you just before the show starts.
All right, sounds great. Thanks, Perrin. Thanks, Lauren. I guess I'll start us off. I'm going to talk a little bit about Bon Appétit, and then as Perrin and Lauren were saying, we're going to bring on Annie Labatt to tell us a little bit more about the Impresario. Before we get into the program tonight, let me take a minute to remind all of you that this video, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, this is not where the performance itself is going to take place. Those of you who've been with us before have heard me say this dozens of times, but it's worth reminding everyone and for our newcomers to point out again. This is just our pre-show stream. The performance itself will be streamed on Houston Grand Opera's website and through Marquee TV. So you have three options for watching Bon Appétit and the Impresario tonight. The first, you can download the Marquee TV app on your smart device, including your smart TV, and create a login. Two, you can go directly to marquee.tv in a web browser. Simply create a login, and you can access the whole HGO season for free. Or three, go to hgo.org/digital. Use your HGO login credentials or create an HGO login, and you can watch the whole season there for free as well. If you have any questions or comments during the pre-show tonight, feel free to type them into the comment boxes on Facebook or on YouTube. We'll be able to see all of them and respond on here live. So the two operas we're releasing tonight are actually two separate videos on Marquee TV. It's not like a double bill in the theater where, we do one, we take an intermission, and the next one starts right after intermission, whether you're in your seat or not. They're two different videos on demand beginning at 7:30. So you can watch either one you want first, but you will have to click over to a separate video to start the next one. That's not just going to go right through both videos. So make sure you click over to the second video, whichever one you start first. I'll start with a quick introduction to Bon Appétit. The music is composed by Lee Hoiby to a libretto by Mark Schulgasser. The opera is only actually about 20 minutes long. It's a monodrama for mezzo-soprano. She's the only character in the opera. Lee Hoiby originally scored it for 11 instruments, but it can also be done with only voice and piano, and that's the version we'll be presenting tonight. The librettist credit, as I've said, goes to Mark Schulgasser, Hoiby's partner, who worked with Hoiby on a number of different pieces. The words themselves, though, are actually adapted from two different episodes of The French Chef, Julia Child's cooking show. So we've all had plenty of cooking over the last few days, and we're going to have more of it tonight. The 20-minute piece is basically just Julia Child preparing a chocolate cake, the perfect French chocolate cake, le gâteau au chocolat l'éminence brune. She goes through the recipe and ends with her signature Bon Appétit, and it's just 20 minutes of fun with Julia Child's characteristic wit. Her sing-song falsetto is written right into the score as well, so listen out for that, the signature Julia Child. Something else, though, that you might hear written into the score, something I find really interesting about Lee Hoiby's music. If you pay close attention to it, what you should listen for is how the perception of Lee Hoiby's music has changed over time. And let me explain what I mean. Hoiby was composing in the mid-20th century, and these days, a lot of singers and performers might call his music difficult to learn or difficult to memorize. Compared to Mozart or Verdi or Puccini, Hoiby's music might not be as melodic or as lyrical. You'll hear the vocal lines written specifically to the prosody of the words. So listen for how the melody of the vocal line, it just accents the text. That's what Hoiby was composing. And when compared to the classic operas in the standard repertoire, it can be considered difficult to learn that or difficult to memorize for an opera singer. I find that really interesting because of how Hoiby was perceived by his contemporaries in classical music while he was composing. By the time we get into the 20th century, opera had splintered into many different genres and subgenres. Now, Lee Hoiby, who passed away only 9 years ago in 2011, composed primarily between 1950 and 2000 or so. And the first half of the 20th century was mostly dominated by the second Viennese school of composition, led by the serialism and atonalism of Arnold Schoenberg, Anton Webern, and Alban Berg. Lee Hoiby is starting to compose at the heels of that second Viennese school of composition. Didn't recognize a tonal center, nor did they focus much on lyricism or beauty of melody. Now, Hoiby, by contrast, was mentored by Italian-American composer Giancarlo Menotti, and their aesthetic was much more lyrical and melodic than what came immediately before them. So I find it just kind of a fun fact that today, Hoiby might be considered modernist, or singers might find his music a little more difficult to learn than, say, Mozart or Verdi. But when one considers that what came right before Hoiby, the atonal music of the second Viennese school, which isn't performed too often these days, especially in operatic and vocal music, then you can understand why Hoiby's contemporaries in the middle of the 20th century found his music too lyrical, almost even too pedantic. But thankfully, over time, and with the benefit of hindsight, we can trace Hoiby's aesthetic tradition to a larger group of these mid-century composers that I don't want to say rejected, but they moved away from the serialism of the second Viennese school, or they truly never really dabbled in that aesthetic at all. Composers like Hoiby, Menotti, Barber, Copland, Moore, while perhaps looked down upon by the musical intelligentsia for their lyricism, now thankfully are appreciated for pioneering that genre of Americana in mid-century vocal music. So Bon Appétit is a monodrama for mezzo-soprano in the role of Julia Child. And the first person to sing this role was not actually an opera singer, but was none other than Jean Stapleton, the actress who played Edith Bunker in the hit sitcom All in the Family. There are actually a couple fun parallels between Lee Hoiby and Jean Stapleton's careers. They're total coincidences, but it's fun to see how their careers tracked in the mid-20th century. Lee Hoiby's very first opera was titled The Scarf, premiered in 1958. And coincidentally, that was the very same year that Jean Stapleton made her cinematic debut in the movie musical Damn Yankees. Then, Hoyby's most famous opera is probably Summer and Smoke, based on the play of the same name by Tennessee Williams. That premiered in 1971, which, again, coincidentally, was the same exact year that Jean Stapleton made her debut as Edith Bunker in the sitcom All in the Family. In 1983, Hoyby wrote another monodrama titled The Italian Lesson. And then in 1989, when Bon Appétit premiered with Jean Stapleton performing both monodramas, Bon Appétit and The Italian Lesson, in a one-woman double bill off Broadway. Pure coincidence, obviously, that some major pieces in their careers line up, and they both did much, much more than that. But I thought there were some pretty fun coincidences that you could kind of track their careers in the mid-20th century. Even though Jean Stapleton is most famous for All in the Family and kind of that very shrill and distinct voice of Edith Bunker, she started her career in summer stock theater and then an off-Broadway musical, so she could certainly carry a tune. The vocal writing in Bon Appétit doesn't call for a perfectly produced operatic sound, but we do have international sensation Jamie Barton in the role, as she can do it all. And she does have a perfectly produced operatic sound, as always. The HBO video you'll see will be similar in concept to Finkensport, which we released last month. Similar in concept in the sense that it doesn't take place on stage, but rather is produced as a film. Jamie Barton is in a real kitchen baking a real cake. Of course, the cake isn't fully baked in only the 20-minute time span of the piece, but there's a great montage as the time passes before Jamie pulls the finished cake out of the oven. The film direction for Bon Appétit was done by Ryan McKinney, who many of us know as an HBO studio alumnus and bass baritone who appears frequently at HBO, but who over the last few months has turned to digital film editing during the pandemic. He's put out tons of videos on his YouTube and Facebook pages. He started the digital series called Keep the Music Going. So you can visit keepthemusicgoing.com or just search for that hashtag on Facebook or YouTube, and you can find all the really great digital content Ryan has produced over the last 8 months. A lot of it is really funny and really clever. A lot of it's really poignant and heartfelt. I recommend checking all of it out. Ryan co-directed Finkensport for film with Lauren Meeker, and he co-directed tonight's Bon Appétit with his wife, Tanya. Fun fact that Ryan is starting to talk about a little more often over the last few months is that he's known to opera audiences as this incomparable bass baritone, but he's actually no stranger to film production. His father was a director of photography on Beverly Hills 90210. So he grew up around film sets in LA. And the quality of the film and the editing shows Ryan's very versatile skills as an artist. Bottom line for Bon Appétit, when you watch this tonight, just have fun. It's a great 20 minutes of baking a cake. And tomorrow, you can try baking the cake yourself. We're going to put the recipe into the comments section. So follow the link that will pop into the comments section on Facebook and YouTube, and then send us your pictures of your gâteau au chocolat l'éminence brune. But now, that's enough for Bon Appétit. We're going to turn to the Impresario, written by Mozart, to a new script and story by Jim Luigs. I'm pleased to introduce our next guest, Annie Labatt. Annie is an associate professor and the director of galleries at Sweetbriar College, and she is Opera San Antonio's guest lecturer. Welcome, Annie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for the beautiful introduction, Jeremy, to Bon Appétit. I'm going to talk about Impresario, about the opera we're going to see tonight, and also about the Impresario that we're not going to see tonight, meaning the original 18th century opera, which is quite different from the opera we're seeing this evening. But the original 18th century opera is very much embedded in the genetic code of the Impresario that we're going to see tonight. So it's really important. I think it's really important to step back and think about histories and the many layers of creativity that produced the opera that we're going to be hearing. So the opera was originally written and performed in 1786 in February. This is, as I mentioned, a work of art that has stood the test of time, but maybe not in the most traditional sense, not by staying exactly the same, but by morphing and shifting over time. Now, I know it's not totally unheard of in opera to change a time setting. We know about lots of operas that do this. My favorite is La Bohème, that was set on the moon. A wonderful production, if you can catch it. But in that case, the opera, meaning the words and the characters and the setting, all of that, the music, everything stays exactly the same. It's just that it was on the moon. So the setting is the only thing that's different. In Impresario, the characters, the setting, and a majority of the words has been rewritten, and that's by its new directors and librettists. And of course, as Jeremy mentioned, the words are by Jim Luigs, and the new look is crafted by Lauren Meeker, who we saw at the beginning of this chat. The music of Impresario, however, is true to its originator, Mozart, who produced the piece in 4 days' time as part of a competition. The other participant in the competition was Antonio Salieri. Now, if you've ever seen the movie Amadeus from 1984, you know something of a version of the relationship between Salieri and Mozart. But did Salieri really try to kill Mozart and really try to claim his unwritten last piece, Requiem? No, probably not. Scholars say no, that's mainly Hollywood. But what the movie does do and accurately shows is how there were these two very talented men, very talented composers, moving in the same circles, competing for similar audiences and commissions, very, very ambitious men. Salieri, the older of the two, was the composer for the imperial court of the Holy Roman Emperor Joseph II, and I'll show you a picture of him a little bit later. Joseph obviously valued Salieri's talent, but he also knew about this up-and-coming dynamo named Mozart. Recognizing the talents of these two men and banking on the spirit of creativity blended with ambition, the emperor hosted a big luncheon for 80 friends of his, and the main entertainment was to be this big competition, a competition between the two main composers. The emperor gave Mozart and Salieri the 4 days to write their operas, and on the day of the luncheon, he placed both men on opposite ends of the room with their singers, and they performed for the 80 guests. Both Mozart and Salieri wrote operas that were about competitions between two female sopranos. So you have competitions within a competition, this time with two women fighting for a major role and bigger pay. Salieri's piece was in Italian, the dominant language of the opera at the time. It was called Prima la musica e poi le parole, so first the music and then the words. It was mainly lighthearted, but one key point is that Salieri's opera made fun of Da Ponte, who happened to be a good friend of Mozart and became Mozart's main librettist, did the words for Don Giovanni. So really, I mean, it was a lighthearted experience, but it was all of the jokes were at Mozart's expense. Everybody laughed. Salieri won the competition. However, Salieri may have won that competition, but you're probably never going to hear that opera, and you're probably not going to hear any of Salieri's other operas. Meanwhile, Mozart went on to write The Marriage of Figaro in a couple of months, and I think we can all agree that it was game over. When you watch Impresario tonight, you will hear the strains of the competition between Mozart and Salieri. While Salieri used Italian for his lyrics, Mozart's opera used words created by a German librettist, Gottlieb Stephanie. In fact, the title is actually Der Schauspieldirektor, or show director, Impresario. It must have been striking that Mozart selected the German language, the language of the Viennese court and of his homeland, over the more traditional Italian. I bet it was a way of him showing his confidence in his homeland and his homegrown capacities. The first aria that is sung is called My Love and I Are Parted. And it is sung with heartbreaking woe about a lover that has been torn away from her love by fate. The soprano shows depth and maturity. In the 18th century Impresario, this woman is called Madame Herz, and Herz means heart, and hers is breaking. The second soprano is called Mademoiselle, meaning she's not married yet. Mademoiselle Silberklind, Silberklind meaning silver sound. She's lighter, youthful, coquettish, and flirty. The song she sings is Bester Jungling, which is basically come over here, cutie. And the entire song is addressed to her young lover. She tells him to leave his scruples behind and just enjoy the moment because it won't last forever. So maybe is the older woman supposed to be Salieri, wizened and mourning the past? And maybe is Mozart supposed to be the younger woman who's seizing the moment and not looking at the past as he blasts forward with fiery passion? Maybe so. But it is dangerous to graft one story onto the other. I mean, at the end, both sopranos win. They both get the salaries and they both share the part. So is Mozart telling the room that he wants to be a co-court composer with Salieri? I don't really think so. I think his sights were set far higher. It's important to remember that Mozart was something else. He was fluent in almost every language that he touched. He doodled complex mathematical equations in the margins of his musical scores, and he had echoic memory, meaning he basically could memorize all sound. It's hard to imagine that he was looking for a tie. In fact, at the end of the opera, the three singers join in saying, quote, "The goal of rising above others makes the greatest artist small," end quote. Mozart had bigger plans than besting Salieri. He was reaching for the stars. It's clear, however, that Mozart relished the beauty in challenge and competition. And in our Impresario, in tonight's Impresario, the singers join together and they say, quote, "The art is in the art of creation," end quote. Our performance tonight is not set in the 18th century. As I mentioned earlier, this opera has been able to serve as a springboard for many interpretations and time transportations. But I did want to show just a few images that set the scene of the original 18th century opera, because even when the art is updated, as I said, it's still part of the show that we're seeing today. Rightly so. So I'm going to pull up a couple of images, as I did last time, really quickly, and introduce you to the, see if we make sure I've got the right image for you. I don't think that that's what I want to say. Hold on one second. I've got it locked and loaded, I promise. I did it right one time. Well, it doesn't look like the images want to come up. I did have some nice images of Mozart and Salieri, and let me see if maybe I can let me see if I can try one more time. I know that I do have some friends that can help me if this doesn't work. Okay, one more try. All right, here it is. Mozart and Salieri, there they are next to each other, which is quite fun because you can see that Salieri is the older, wizened gentleman, and Mozart is looking out of the side of his eye, that kind of twinkle in his eye. And I have put also an image in here of Mozart with his sister sitting at the piano, just to give you a sense of some of the 18th century styles. You can see it's very big hair and low cut dresses. And I know that I'm trying to make this connection between the aesthetics of the 18th century and the aesthetics of the opera from tonight. You may think is a little bit far-fetched, but listen, it's set in Texas and we love big hair and low cut dresses. That never goes out of style. And here is another image from this late 18th century that just shows just how big their hair would go and low cut their dresses went as well. By comparison, here's an image of Joseph II. He's a Holy Roman Emperor who threw the party. You might think that he's a little less ostentatious, but do note his room and how lavish it is. And just so that you know, that was one room of very many in his home. 1,400 rooms in that house, Schönbrunn Palace in Vienna, which is where this luncheon occurred. I also wanted to show you a few other images of other performances that adopt the 18th century style. This one also set in Houston, performed in Houston rather, which uses that deep imperial red, the neoclassical style, big white wigs. And they even have in the background, you might notice in the background, there's a painting that's set. This is an image, you can see there she is again, an image, quite a common scene of a figure in a moment of apotheosis, rising into the heavens. And I kind of think that maybe the director was using this Pietro da Cartona or an image like it to suggest that Mozart too was reaching for the stars, reaching for the crown of immortality, which is very hard to find in the entire ceiling by Pietro da Cartona, but you get the idea. Then there are some other images that I wanted to show, versions that run the gamut. This is a version from the Bolshoi opera. You can see that it's got the 18th century touch, but with the sort of LSD color scheme, maybe the Beatles go to the opera, that kind of thing. I love it. San Francisco did a version of Impresario that's set in sort of a My Fair Lady aesthetic, turn of the century, maybe Gilded Age look. And Santa Fe went for the old Hollywood look, a little bit later in time. And I can date this, or I would date this to about 1922, because the Picasso in the background that you see there shows the woman running along with her compatriot. But you'll notice that the title, La Course, means the race. So again, a competition between two women behind an opera, which is about a competition between two women. And of course, competing divas and aging stars hoping to up their status and contracts is quite perfect for an old Hollywood setting. Incidentally, the woman that's on the right there, Brenda Ray, is hopefully going to be coming to San Antonio to sing in Lucia del Lammermoor, which is another story about feuds and heartbreak, but this time without a comedy. So I'll just return back to stop sharing. It's important to stress the comedy and the comedic aspects of Impresario, of what you're going to be seeing tonight. Mozart called it, quote, a comedy with music, end quote. I'm sure that the lunches were never quite casual in the Viennese court. You saw the status of that building, but it was not meant to be a super fancy affair. It was a lunch with friends. It was a celebration of music and opera and talent. In truth, talent shines the most when there are higher stakes, when there's another talented person in the room that pushes you. Of course, it stinks when the other person that's pushing you is Mozart, because he's a genius. But at any rate, we are the beneficiaries of that. We, the audience, both in the 18th century and as well as today. Impresario is a lot of fun. You're going to love the little constant references to operas and musical compositions that come from or were inspired by Mozart. Impresario, especially this configuration of it, is a love letter to opera, to its rich history and its exciting present, and to the fact that performances are more powerful than pandemics. So thank you, enjoy. I hope you have a wonderful time listening to both of these operas.
Let me just unmute. Thank you so much, Annie. That was a fantastic insight, and Jeremy as well. Thank you so much. And Lauren, I bet you can't wait, can you?
I can't. I'm so excited to see the premiere this evening. It's going to be such a fun treat to have both productions tonight, and I can't wait.
We're thrilled to have everyone from both Houston, San Antonio. People in Austin maybe are also watching on our website. So thank you all again for joining us. We're about to get started. It's marquee.tv. No, Jeremy, tell me again. Marquee.tv.
Yeah, we've got marquee.tv or hgo.org/digital.
Thank you so much. Apparently, I can't even remember that even after 5 months of this. But thank you all for joining us. These two are really, really fun. Enjoy the show. Go get onto those two platforms now. Thank you to Annie for joining us. I'm doing a fantastic introduction to the Impresario. Jeremy, as ever, for your Bon Appétit. Meeks, you're an amazing director. You're a fantastic leader. Thank you for joining us. And here we go. Let's go.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Enjoy.
everyone.